Support for Central Florida Public Media comes from the Mustard Seed of Central Florida, a furniture and clothing bank that helps rebuild the lives of people who have experienced homelessness, natural disaster, or personal tragedy. For over 35 years, the Mustard Seed has been helping those in need. More at mustardseedfla.org.
Lights, camera, action. Orange County works towards film incentives. You're listening to The Wrap from Central Florida Public Media. I'm Brendan Byrne. The Orange County Film Incentive Work Group is hoping to fine-tune the details of a local film incentive program in the next month or so, as Florida is one of the few states without one. That's according to John Lux, Executive Director of Florida Film and also part of the work group. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that Florida is among the top 5 states for people working in the arts, media, and entertainment industry. He says they're working on 3 programs to bring more production to the county.
The goal is to have 3 different programs. One program that is really focused on the local filmmakers, very low budgets, matching grants essentially to help them get their shorts or small films finished.
Hear more about the push to bring film to Orange County. That's ahead on The Wrap. The big stories this week from Central Florida Public Media. But first, these news headlines. In a unanimous vote, the Orlando Utilities Commission Board passed a controversial new pricing program. Central Florida Public Media's Luis Alfredo Garcia has more on this week's decision.
The program, called Peak Shift, consists of 3 major parts, with the first phase starting in July 2025. The new model will change how solar power is priced, place charges based on monthly grid use, and introduce a time-of-day pricing plan. Despite 16 of the 17 speakers during public comment speaking against the plan, OUC board commissioners say they've already made changes to account for public feedback. Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer, who sits on the board, says Peak Shift is the best plan for the future.
A lot of the speakers talked about change. We are making change. We're making change to adapt to a changing marketplace. But I think, in fact, as Clint mentioned, we're going to give the opportunity for some people to save money and most people not to have much higher of a bill.
But solar users like Orlando City Commissioner Patty Sheehan disagree. She has been outspoken about her displeasure with the plan and its price change to residential solar power. Sheehan says she feels as though OUC has misrepresented the impact of solar customers.
I think we are part of the solution. I am actually generating a little excess power that OUC can then sell to my neighbors. I see that as helping net zero, not hurting it. I'm generating during the peak of the day.
OUC plans to phase out its use of coal and natural gas by 2050, but those against the Peak Shift plan claim the rolled back solar incentives will dissuade residents from buying into solar power use. OUC thinks it'll only help. Luis Alfredo Garcia, Central Florida Public Media.
State Attorney Andrew Bain's office has dropped all charges against former State Representative Caroline Amnesty. Central Florida Public Media's Joe Burns report that Amnesty, who has no criminal record, completed a diversion program.
Carolina Amnesty completed a financial crimes course, a financial literacy course, and 30 hours of community service, according to the State Attorney's Office. Once those were complete, prosecutors dismissed the case. The 30-year-old Windermere Republican lost her District 45 seat to Democrat Leonard Spencer. She had been indicted in August on 4 felony counts involving the misuse of her notary commission. The grand jury alleged Amnesty knowingly notarized a document with a forged signature in 2021, when she was an administrator at Central Christian University. Joe Burns, Central Florida Public Media.
The Orange County Schools superintendent will ultimately decide whether to replace 34 school resource officers with school guardians at 30 schools in the district. That's unless the district and law enforcement in Apopka, Ocoee, Winter Garden, Winter Park, and Windermere can reach an agreement by January. Unlike school resource officers who are law enforcement, school guardians are armed volunteers. School board members unanimously opposed the proposal. More local news stories on our website. Visit cfpublic.org. Special Hearts Farm isn't your typical farm. Sure, it tends to animals, but the organization's main mission is teaching individuals with disabilities and unique abilities meaningful work and providing supported employment opportunities.
And now that I came to this place, it totally changed my behaviors. I love this place so much.
Hear that story on our website, cfpublic.org. Orange County is working to bring more lights, camera, and action to the region. The Orange County Film Incentive Work Group is making recommendations to the County Commission on what a film incentive program could look like, as Florida is one of only 13 states without a statewide incentive program. John Lux is the executive director of Film Florida and is also part of the work group. He spoke with Central Florida Public Media's Talia Blake about those efforts.
What recommendations are the Orange County Film Incentive Work Group making for tax incentives?
The goal is to have three different programs. One program that is really focused on the local filmmakers, very low budgets, matching grants essentially to help them get their shorts or small films finished. The second one is a commercial program that we're considering, and obviously Orange County and all of Central Florida have been doing major television commercials for decades, and we want to continue the strength of that, but also grow it. We see that as an area of opportunity. And then the third one is basically the traditional film and television rebate program that would incentivize projects that would spend a good amount of money and hire a good amount of local residents onto those projects and have true economic development, but most importantly, show off the Central Florida area. So you get that second bump afterwards from an economic development standpoint through tourism.
Where will the funds come from for these incentives? Like, will taxpayers be footing the bill?
They're looking at using general funds to bolster the Orlando Film Commission, which is sorely needed because if we do increase the volume of work coming to the area, there needs to be resources both from a marketing standpoint and from an administrative and operating standpoint. Beyond that, though, from the incentive standpoint, they're looking at using the tourism development tax dollars to fund that. And that's why it's so important that when we do put these programs together that we are showcasing Central Florida and Orange County, because it's a twofold process. Obviously, we want the money spent initially. We want the jobs for the local community. But the second part of it is really what's important is that people are seeing Orange County on the big screen, small screen, mobile screens, and that it is enticing them to then come here and spend their tourism dollars and recoup that money into the tourism development coffers.
So it kind of sounds like boosting the local film industry and kind of getting these incentives off the ground will ripple into the rest of our local economy.
It does have kind of that spidering effect. There obviously are those direct jobs that we refer to of people, camera people, on-screen actors, directors, all of those type of things. But then there's those ancillary businesses that benefit: the carpenters, the electricians, the HVAC people, food trucks benefit greatly, insurance companies, financial services, those type of things that do directly impact the filming because they're involved in that process. But then that secondary part of it, which is the tourism aspect, which then helps the airport. It helps the Uber and taxi drivers. It helps all the restaurants and the tourist attractions.
For people who may ask why we need to offer incentives to get projects filmed here, what would you say to them?
The past is kind of the history of it. Florida used to be number 3 in the country for film and television production. Incentives kicked in the early 2000s. Florida had a program for a handful of years in there, and we remained very strong. In the last decade, since we have not had a program, we've gone from top 5 of film and television production to literally not even in the top 20 rankings. We've lost more than 100 major feature films in the last couple of years that would have spent more than $2 billion here in the state. It's competition. And right now with the incentives, Florida is the only state in the Southeast that doesn't have a statewide incentive program. And that's why we're trying to work so hard, these local incentives, to have a reason for people to come here financially.
John Lux, thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you very much for having me.
That was Film Florida's John Lux. For a more in-depth version of this conversation, visit cfpublic.org. That's it for The Wrap this week. This podcast is produced by Central Florida Public Media with assistance from News Director LaToya Dennis and Digital Director Ryan Ellison. I'm Brendan Byrne. This is The Wrap.